Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Thank you so much for being a listener of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you've been a longtime listener and you haven't left a review yet, I would really appreciate if you would go to Apple Podcasts and leave a honest, but hopefully 5-star review. It really does take a lot of effort and energy to put together this podcast, and I do enjoy doing it, but I also want to reach as many people as possible. Those 5-star reviews helps Apple tell other people that they may be interested in listening to this podcast. A little bit about my personal life is that I am in the process of looking at new jobs and interviewing. I've been really happy at my current job, but unfortunately, they decided they no longer want to have me part-time, and I do not want to work full-time, so it's no longer a match, and so I'm looking for the next opportunity. That got me thinking a lot about what I'm looking for in wherever I go next. And it just shows that long gone are the days where people stay at the same job for decades. While I've met a few physicians that are still working at the first job that they started at out of training, that really seems to be the exception rather than the rule. Personally, I am on my 4th physician W-2 job since completing my fellowship training. And as I said, I'm currently in the process of finding job number 5. And that doesn't count the locums work that I've also been doing while working my current part-time W-2 job. That's not to say that I'm proud of how many different physician jobs I've held. I chose my first job with the real hope that I would beat the odds of 50% of physicians who leave their first job within 3 years. I focused less on the salary and compensation and really tried to look at the overall picture. I discussed buy-in for partnership and asked about the process and how the practice valuation would be determined. I asked about the ability and process to buy the office building, which was separate from the practice itself. I asked for past tax filing reports and financials, which I reviewed with a CPA. I also asked to talk to a physician who had left the practice and did speak to this physician, so that I really got a sense of what it was like to be an employee at this practice and what was surrounding this physician leaving. I did as much due diligence as I could think of. And even with all that, I ended up leaving that practice just shy of 3 years. The Medical Group Management Association, MGMA, and recruiting firm Jackson Physician Search conducted and analyzed data from online surveys of 253 physicians and administrations during August and September of 2023. They found that while currently practicing physicians of all ages spend about 6 years on average at their first jobs following residency or fellowship, physicians who complete residency or fellowship in the last 6 years spend less than 2 years on average at their first job. 5% of administrators reported that they had not retained any beginning physicians for more than 3 years. While the top factors physicians stated that they were considering when it came to their first job were compensation at 76%, location at 64%, and work-life balance at 38%. The top factors physicians cited for leaving their first job were practice ownership and governance models, 35%, and compensation and geographic preference. The top factors physicians said would keep them at their job are compensation, 48%, work-life balance, 40%, and culture and environment, 36%. However, administrators said the top factors they perceived as causing physicians to join and stay at their organization were the organization's reputation, practice ownership, and government and geographic preference. If you are thinking of leaving your current job, there are, of course, many things to consider. In this episode, I'm going to discuss 3 specific questions where you can find those answers in your current employment contract. And this is specifically for people considering leaving their current physician job who plan to continue practicing medicine. So this isn't really for people who are leaving and deciding to do something other than practicing medicine or are leaving and retiring, but leaving one physician job to go to another physician job. The first question is, do you have a non-compete in your contract? If you're leaving your current physician job and plan on continuing to work as a physician in the same geographic location, you'll want to review your current employment contract for anything referring to a non-compete. If your new job is far away, then a non-compete is unlikely to be an issue. Personally, I hate non-competes. I believe they're not good for patients, they're not good for physicians, and they often serve as handcuffs for people who are tied to a geographic location. There are some states that have banned non-compete agreements like California, Minnesota, North Dakota, and Oklahoma. Other states have restrictions on non-compete agreements. If you do have a non-compete agreement in your contract, you may want to check with an employment attorney on whether or not it's enforceable in the state where you are currently working. On April 23, 2024, the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTIC, voted 3-2 along partition lines in a special public meeting to adopt the non-compete clause rule, also called the final rule, which would prohibit most employee non-competes with retroactive effect, except existing non-compete provisions of senior executives. The rule would not become effective until 120 days after publication in the Federal Register, which would happen this August. However, the rule is already facing legal challenges, so it's really unclear what the future state of non-compete agreements are at this point. Even if you do have a non-compete and you're geographically tied to your location, all is not lost. I have known physicians who worked with their current employers to reduce or eliminate their non-compete. If the non-compete is too wide-reaching, it may not be enforceable. However, it is possible that a non-compete clause in your current contract could lead other employers in your geographic area to not hire you so that they don't get entangled with your current employer. Again, this is where an employment attorney could be helpful. The second question you want to look for in your contract is how much notice do you have to give? This will be spelled out somewhere in your contract. From my personal experience and having talked to my contract attorney many times, this is typically 60 to 90 days for employed physicians. If you are a partner of a practice and are thinking of leaving, that time frame could be longer. Some people consider giving more time than specified in the contract in order to give their employer more time to prepare. Depending on your employer and your own situation, this may not be a good idea. While you may have to give 90-day notice to leave, depending on your contract, your employer may also be able to ask you to leave with no cause with 90-day notice. This is not uncommon. So if you give 120-day notice, you may find yourself without a job and a paycheck 30 days earlier than you were expecting. When deciding when to give notice, you want to think about not only when you want to leave your current job, but also consider when you want to or when you can start your new job and how much time you want to have in between your two jobs. If you're leaving one job for a new job, depending on the new job, it can be months before you can even start after you sign your new contract. It takes time to get a new state license if needed. Though the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact can actually make for a quicker process potentially, depending on what state you practice in or what state your residence in and which state you're going to. You can find out more about that at their website, imlcc.org. Credentialing at hospitals or surgical centers you'll be working at also takes time. You'll also need to get on insurance plans so that you can be paid when you see patients at the new job. For my last job, I signed the contract in May and started working on my Illinois license right away. I got my Illinois license in July and then started working on all the other credentialing. I wasn't able to actually start working in clinic until October, and I didn't get on all the insurance plans until I think January. So that means it took over 6 months from the point that I signed the contract to actually being fully integrated and having everything I needed to work and be paid at that job. Your new contract will likely have a start date that takes into account the time it takes to get up and running. However, there can always be delays that come up, and depending on your employer or how your contract's written, you may find yourself not getting paid until you're able to start working. This means you may want to have contingency plans for income if that's an issue. And of course, when you're thinking about how much time you want off in between jobs, you may be thinking that this may be a great time to take a long vacation. If you need to move, you'll want to take that into account as well. If you have a significant other or family, then there are a lot more variables. Maybe you want to transition between jobs over the summer so the kids can finish the school year out at their current school before they begin at a new school in the fall. When you start talking to the new job that you're going to, you may want to talk about what a good time is to start there. For example, maybe you want to start there in the fall so that you can go with your family on an extended vacation over the summer. Remember, everything is negotiable, and this is the time for you to decide what you really want to do and dream a little. The third question to ask is, do you have to pay for malpractice tail insurance? Most physicians have malpractice insurance as an employment benefit that is paid by the employer. There are different types of malpractice insurance: claims-made and occurrence-made. Many academic centers and large hospital systems will have occurrence malpractice insurance, and the coverage provided for the majority of residents and fellows is an occurrence malpractice insurance policy. With occurrence-made insurance, the insurance carrier will cover any claims that were made while the treatment occurred while you were covered by the occurrence-made policy. Claims-made insurance protects you from malpractice claims only if the company that insured you at the time of the alleged occurrence is the same company as the time the claim is filed in court. Let's say you've been working at the same physician job since 2020, and the job provides you with malpractice insurance from Company A. You treat a patient in May 2021 who then sues you in February 2022. If you're still working at the same job and you have your malpractice insurance from Company A when the claim is filed and when you treat the patient, then you're covered for that claim with Company A. However, if you switched insurance carriers to Company B in January 2022, you would only be covered by Company A if you have purchased tail insurance. If you're thinking of leaving your job and your malpractice insurance is under a group policy, then you won't be able to take your malpractice insurance with you when you leave the group. In order to cover yourself for any possible malpractice suits, you will need tail malpractice coverage. Depending on your employment contract, your employer may cover your tail or may require you to do so. Tail insurance will provide malpractice protection for acts committed while covered under the claims-made policy by the prior insurance carrier when you switch to a new insurance carrier or policy. Even if your new insurance carrier is the same company, if it's a different policy, it will probably not cover your claims, where the possible malpractice act was when you were under the previous policy. Of course, you'll always want to check with your insurance carrier to see if that's the case. The cost of tail insurance is a one-time assessment, though you may be able to pay it off in payments. You can buy tail insurance through the insurance carrier that held the claims-made policy that was covering you, or with a different malpractice insurer altogether. Tail insurance can cost 1.5 to 3 times your annual malpractice insurance premium. Depending on your specialty, it could be an annoying but reasonable amount, or it could be a crushing, difficult for you to leave your job amount. Of course, I've heard from OBGYNs about their malpractice insurance woes, and at least from one OBGYN whose tail insurance was so high that he was basically stuck at his current job. If your prior employer purchased an individual malpractice policy, it is possible that you could retain that policy even when you leave that practice. This may work out if you're starting your own practice, or you can negotiate with your new employer to keep your individual policy. You may also be able to put your individual policy on hold for a limited period of time. Usually, the max amount a policy can be on hold is 1 year. You can potentially put your policy on hold if you're not actively seeing patients and you're not providing medical treatment. This gives more time to decide whether or not you want to keep the policy, or if you want to just go ahead and pay the tail and end the policy. It also delays the time period where the tail needs to be paid. While the policy is inactive, there may be a small fee involved, or potentially no fee at all. If the policy is on hold for a long time before you elect to end your policy and pay the tail, it's also possible that the tail insurance could be less than the policy were terminated immediately instead of being put on hold. If you do have to pay for tail insurance, you may want to try to negotiate with your new job for some way to cover the cost of that tail insurance. This could be through something like a signing bonus. It may be possible for your new job to purchase nose coverage from your new malpractice carrier to ensure claims that happened prior to the new policy do not go uncovered. Nose and tail insurance cover essentially the same thing. Tail insurance is generally referred to a policy you purchase from the carrier you're terminating, and nose insurance refers to the policy you purchase with your new malpractice carrier. In any case, you'll want to plan for how to cover the cost of the additional malpractice policy if needed. Any new employment contract you sign will likely have clauses regarding non-compete, notice of termination of employment, and malpractice coverage. Consider how you want to negotiate your new contract in light of what obstacles you face with your current contract. If you're relocating to a geographic area to be closer to family, and you know you don't want to leave if the new job doesn't work out, then make sure you negotiate a non-compete that still allows you to work for another practice in that geographic area. For one of my prior jobs, I was able to negotiate the non-compete to 10 miles from any office I personally provide a medical service instead of their standard non-compete of 10 miles from any office affiliated with that hospital system. This allowed me to still work within the metropolitan area when I left that job. I've also discussed having tail malpractice covered by the employer in cases where the insurance was a claims-made policy. While many people focus on compensation when negotiating a contract, remember that everything in the contract is negotiable. Give some thought about what is important to you to have clearly defined in your next employment contract and make sure to negotiate for it. It can feel tough to negotiate. One of the reasons for the gender pay gap is that women are less likely to negotiate aggressively than men when it comes to negotiating for themselves. The Harvard Kennedy School found that women can outperform men when they negotiate on the behalf of others. It may be helpful to frame negotiating for a job as something you are doing for your family and not just yourself. If you are considering a career transition and would like guided reflection to help you make the best decision for yourself, coaching can be a powerful tool. I have coached multiple clients through career transition and job changes. If you would like to learn more about coaching and how it can help you, sign up for a free consultation call with me at my website, www.growyourwealthymindset.com. Thank you so much for being a listener of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, and I'll be back next week with another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.